Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That CMMC Show. Today, I'm joined by a recovering C-suite consultant extraordinaire and somebody who's actually gotten an organization through CMMC certification. Now, this is going to be a fun conversation because we're kind of taking off the gloves a little bit and talking at an executive buy-in level to figure out how in the world do you position CMMC as not a loss, but an actual revenue enabler for the organization. So, Jeff, thanks for joining, my friend. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So my last real job was CIO and FSO for a large DoD contractor, and that was for 20 years. Went through 2 acquisitions, and in the second acquisition, we were acquired by Arlington Capital, big, well-known, well-respected PE firm. And I knew that from an IT perspective, we needed to have a value differentiator as we went into the next sale. So gravitated towards CMMC, not just for the value proposition, but also too for the company survival perspective. And in that journey, decided that we needed to leverage it as early as possible, mainly because they had this great program, JSVA, the Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment, which allowed for DIBCAC, DCMA driven assessment alongside of a C3PAO. And what you get out of that was, a SPURS score that was high confidence on site, as well as, so it's kind of a 2-for-1, as well as your C3PAO assessment for CMMC version 2, level 2. And so it's kind of that bang for the buck was really there. So it was an aggressive timeline to get through and leveraged some really, really good partners to help us get through that process. And then sold the company in February of 24 for $1 billion. Huge valuation multiplier with distinct reference to CMMC readiness from the acquisition, the acquiring company. So hence the reason that I'm now retired.
Yeah, there you go. Little known fact about Jeff as well. He likes to jump out of airplanes, or at least used to. How many jumps do you have under your belt, Jeff?
650 jumps. And the big takeaway on that is that I don't like to fail.
That's fair. Failure could mean death in certain circumstances, jumping out of an airplane. So
high peril.
Well, that gets us, that's a great setting of the stage for kind of the first question, because I've been in this CMMC space, DFAR 7012, since 2018. So I've been immersed and heard about every possible question, statement, justification for why we're not doing it. And the one that it always boils down to when we're talking to executives or an IT person or a GRC person's trying to pitch to executives, they don't understand how to articulate the risk of non-compliance with CMMC. And whether that's a director reporting to a C-suite or a C-suite to a board, I've seen that narrative fall short many, many times, and the justification for why it's so important. So when you were going through this whole process, I mean, we would deem you an early adopter, right? Like an early adopter, a certification.
Like I think number 7. I think we were number 7.
It's like, I mean, you guys were right on the front line. How did you convince, persuade, articulate the narrative of the importance of CMMC for the business? Help us spin a tale for the other struggling non-executives out there, or other executives that need help to help pitch the urgency of why people need it.
It's a great question. I think you have to know your audience, and every audience is different, and every motivation for each company based upon the way that they're approaching the industry is going to be different. Since we were owned by private equity, it was value creation. That was their motivator, was value creation. And I don't like to use fear as a tactic. I'd rather focus on value in general. I think fear diminishes novel ideas in a lot of different ways. It kind of crushes them. And what you find is, working to a list instead of working to a solution. And with PE being the audience, early on in the board of directors meetings, I gravitated toward value. And we all know that if you're involved with your business development team at all, they get very excited with any kind of value creation, any kind of
They
market
do.
differentiator, anything like that. So I got up in the board of directors meeting early on and illustrated the fact that with some simple, kind of open-ended questions to vice president of business development. And I said, what would it mean to the company if we can move the needle on gross profit, 5%, 3%, 5%, and grow the needle on net profit, 1 to 3%. What does that mean? And then I just let them roll. And they just rolled, and they started monopolizing the conversation, which was beautiful. And they kind of came back around to, okay, explain what you mean, and then really started talking about less about the peril and more about the opportunity there, and being an early adopter and kind of getting in there and being a leader in that industry, and that all the contracting offices would resonate with them. We know that they're going to put the DFAR clauses in more as a checkbox and less as a distinct differentiator within the contract. And if you can then just alleviate any of their fears on that side and bring them confidence, and not just through the initial acquisition, but in the length of the contract. And we know a lot of these contracts last 5-10 years or more. And the fear on the contracting offices is going to be, hey, listen, we don't want to have to reprocure in 2026 because your SPUR score is down, or your CMMC certification is not there, and now we've got to put it back on the market, because that's a very expensive endeavor. And so kind of really played to those things, and it was well received.
See, that's great, because I tell people all the time, it's like, if you can get your BD team on your side and get their voice into the conversation about, hey, Lockheed's asking for this. Hey, the Army's asking for this. Boeing, RTX, you name it. They're asking for this. Just FYI, that has been the strongest driving force in getting people to realize, oh, this thing isn't going away. I remember talking to a prime a few weeks ago, and they were telling me they were similar case, early adopter like you guys. And they were like, we were going after a big award from Lockheed. They picked us. And when we asked them why, they're like, because we know you already have CMMC taken care of. Like, that just immediately took the stress completely out of our system. And we were able to say, these are the guys that we want to go with. To your point, right? They don't want to have to recompete the thing, rebid the thing a year later, 2 years later. They want to find a long-term partner, and getting that cert early shows that you're dedicated not only to doing what you have to do, but also that you're willing to keep it, right? It's like, if you spent that much work to adopt it early, you're not going to let that thing slip through your fingers.
Right.
And that's kind of the interesting piece, kind of tying into the next question here. People see compliance and IT as a cost center, right? It's like you just want my money, Jeff. You just want to spend my money on things, and you're not going to generate any revenue for the company. Again, the tale is old as time.
Yep.
What is your kind of narrative or conversation around IT and compliance in this kind of, flip situation, being almost like a revenue enabler? How did you kind of pivot or have that conversation? How are you able to articulate the ROI of how IT can help support revenue generation in the organization?
That's great. I think, the majority of us IT leaders, we do battle with finance more than we partner with finance. And I think that is that there's not this passion to understand high finance, this passion to understand this. There's certainly a passion from the technology perspective, but if you can as a IT leader, CIO, VP of IT, et cetera, really start to understand the company finances and the way that they're structured, and partner up with your CFO. Then what you're going to see is that you can talk their language, and as you're talking their language, you can start to articulate aspects of the finances that you can take advantage of. And this is, CFOs, regardless of business development's influence, CFOs are the bottom line for the profitability of the company. The P&L kind of rests with the CFO. And if you look at, if you're able to articulate, your related expectations, and specifically around waterfall impact. So a little bit of fear, you're sprinkling a little fear in there, but also to direct EBITDA impact, and the way that you can leverage add backs for one-time costs. You can write those memos for one-time cost, and it's not going to affect your EBITDA. Obviously, there's going to be a capital impact, but outside of that, it's not going to impact the EBITDA. And CFOs, you have to bridge that gap to allow them to understand, hey, listen, this is where we're coming from. We're a partner, and here's the way we're going to do it so we don't impact the EBITDA. And then also take a look at the compound annual growth rate. So the CAGR is very important too. What are those expectations for growth, and how do they reflect, and how does that overlap with your waterfall? Extremely important. And then of course, any kind of cost recovery opportunities that you can find, you want to be front and center on that. And I think early on, this was evident in the M&A due diligence, and being able to articulate this and be able to partner with the CFO on these financial aspects of it. Of course, I had already won over the business development people, so there was really no battle to be had with anybody else. It was more getting aligned with the finance team.
And for those listening that might not know any of those acronyms, this is why it's so important to talk to your finance team, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when I was in IT for 17 years, I didn't have these kind of conversations. And looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have been able to articulate a lot better to my CFO, right? Because it's like, I can talk sales all day, right? That's fine. But being able to articulate to the CFO what the actual investment, the cost, the payback, the impact to EBITDA, and long-term being, held by private equity, the valuation, right? What is this going to do to our company if we either wanted to sell, or if we're already under private equity, be sold yet again to somebody else? And so this is just a good wake-up call. You might know what DNS is, but you might not know how to spell EBITDA. And so if you can get both of those things under your belt, you're going to be kind of an unstoppable force in finding allies in your CMMC journey.
Agreed.
So the next up, we all know CMMC is not cheap. And this kind of ties in a little bit to the other question here. When it comes to understanding how much it's going to cost to do CMMC, what is a good kind of rule of thumb? And then how do you have to plan, or let me ask this question. Is this something that you had in your budget prior, something that you had to go request additional funds for? And if it was additional funds, how do you make that case for potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over a rolling 12-month period to bootstrap and get everything compliant? How do you actually justify, hey, let's say my budget was, $1 million. I'm going to have to ask for another $300,000 to make sure this thing's done right. How do I go back and like articulate that without getting shot down and without looking like I was an idiot or mismanaging money? Because that's the other big part, right? I want to be a good steward, and me asking for more money, people don't typically like that, Jeff.
Right. I had this tool, obviously as CIO for the last 20 years, but then, several CIO tenures before this. And when it came down to, ultimately not getting the resources that you need, and it's way beyond resources too. You have to have the cultural backing, you have to have the mission within the company, and that ownership from the board of directors, CEO, and the rest of the C-level. But the bigger thing is that I would use this little tool, and I wouldn't use it often because it's the cry wolf syndrome. But I would write out you know a lot of the risks and on paper, and hand it over to the CEO, and on that was basically, listen, because I'm not getting the resources that I need, I can't be held liable for any adverse action that happens to the company, and I just need this kind of get out of jail free paper. And over my years, I've never had anybody sign that paper. That's kind of the far end of the spectrum for
Sure.
leverage, but I think it comes back and dovetails into the last question, which is that you have to speak the language of your counterparts in the C-level. You have to speak the language of the board of directors. You have to understand what their motivations are, and then you have to illustrate your your value proposition in terms that they understand, and dispense with the acronyms on the technical side. Talk real business, and I think that's what moves mountains for getting the resources that you need.
I love it. So we talked about money. We talked about positioning and strategy. The thing that boggles people's mind, I'm talking very large enterprises, even all the way down to like the small mom and pop machine shops, right? We've talked to them all. We have a wide variety of different clients that we support. But what baffles people the most is not only it's expensive, I didn't budget for it, I'm gonna have to go request more funds. My leadership doesn't understand the value of doing this. But the last part is what's fascinating to me. People do not realize how long it takes to do this.
Yep. Yep.
People think, oh, it's an IT problem. They can fix it, I don't know, a month, couple months, and then we'll be able to produce this magical certification. I've talked to assessors, and this is funny. Assessors have told me that they've had to suspend phase 1 of their assessment, which is just getting documentation from the company, by the way, nothing too complex. And they've had to suspend it because they didn't have any documentation, but they signed up for an assessment because they thought they were just going to have a conversation, right? We don't need to produce stuff. We're just going to kind of tell them how it's configured, right?
Right.
Just out of curiosity, how long do you typically see it taking to not only have technical build outs that are CMMC compliant, but the long pole in the tent being organizational and cultural adoption? Is this a 6-month thing you can do? Is it 12 months? Is it 2 years? What has been kind of your guiding light in consulting and helping other companies to paint a realistic picture that this is not a flip the light switch and we're all of a sudden compliant?
It's interesting, because that's a loaded question, and I think
Very much so.
it starts with we all in the DoD space. Some companies are diversified, but certainly they rely on the DIB industry as a distinct revenue. And with that, I review contracts all the time, and it's very rare that I don't see DFAR 252, 204, 7012 in that contract. And regardless of CMMC, there's been a long-standing, since 2016, that you are required to meet all of those specific objectives within NIST 800-171 Rev 2. So it's kind of hard, if that's in your realm of responsibility, to say that there's a huge leak. Now we know that there is, and we know that there's been some pencil whipping out there for that. And this is the accountability section of, you need to go do it. I think it starts with humility and having a humble conversation with whoever is either holding the purse strings or holding the resources that you need to get this done if there is a gap. And therein lies, I think, that kind of brutal honesty of, here we are, here's where we need to go. And then if you're not getting that, then it's how do we diversify the company and start to looking at, hey, listen, the risk of our revenue stream from the defense industrial revenue could at any time dry up, and how do we diversify to healthcare or to what other industry, commercial side that is not going to be relying on that. And I think once you start to have those real conversations, then it's less about, I see too many times that a company will say, hey, listen, this is a high priority. CMMC is a high priority. We need to go do this, and then go back to their IT team, IT leadership, and the IT leadership recognizes that, hey, listen, we may not have been doing, everything we needed to do to maintain our 70/12, and now there's a gap, and then having fear and that they were responsible for that, all this time, and now there's a huge gap, and not being able to have that humbling conversation that there is a gap. So I think that's the first step, is kind of getting over that emotional barrier and saying, listen, here's where we are, here's exactly what we need to do. And I think that leads to more pragmatic discussions about building the prioritization in. And a lot of times what you'll find is that you get, there's a rallying effort from the C-level around, okay, great, thank you for telling us. Now that we know this, let's move forward, and let's do this. And if we need some help, let's get some help. Let's pull in some things. And then it dovetails into 2 questions ago, which having that conversation with your CFO to structure whatever capital needs or OpEx needs that you need, are able to be absorbed without causing huge detriment to the company.
Yep. I think that's what a lot of people, honestly, and this is kind of sad, but some of the people that we talk to, they're like, they know CMMC, they've never heard of DFARS, right? And it's kind of this, oh, I'm doing this because my prime is asking me to do it, or the DoD's, I hear murmurs that they're going to require it, and they've been oblivious to this has been a contractual obligation, that was supposed to be fully adopted by December 31st, 2017, right? And it was in contracts as early as 2016. And so when people start having that conversation, they're basically starting at zero, right? I mean, because they have no frame of reference for the things they should have already been doing. And I've seen contracts, DFARS pages and FAR pages, it's 10 pages of the whole contract. To look at every single one of them, and especially as an IT person, that part's not your job. You should have been instructed on what was an actual contractual requirement. But let's say somebody's starting at ground zero. Let's say it's a 100-person company, ground zero, hasn't seen a NIST publication. You think 12, 18 months, somewhere around there would be probably a decent roadmap to compliance? Or do you think quicker, think longer? What do you think?
So I think my rule of thumb, and this is pretty straightforward, is that it's $100,000 per every 100 employees. And
I like that.
Yeah, it's really simple math. It's there, and I think it will stand the test of time as kind of that benchmark for spend. And that's based upon your relative example, which is that you're starting from ground zero, you don't have an SSP, and you need to start moving in that path. The acceleration of that is partners and getting the right partners, because a lot of this is one-time costs. Maintenance of CMMC is not necessarily going to cost the same capital or OpEx every single time. You will see an elevation in budget, but it's not going to be like that one-time cost. So there's some ways that you can put that in. And if you can get that 100,000 per 100 employees, kind of articulated across, then I think it allows for the rest of the C-level to start to understand what that magnification is.
I like that. That's a great one, because here's kind of the other interesting thing, and you mentioned it earlier. The cost of not doing this, the cost of not having those conversations is you exit the defense space, whether direct or indirect. And so many people don't realize that if Lockheed has to be certified, anywhere they flow that data, that CUI, those subs and suppliers have to be certified. And I mean, I've talked to companies, I've sadly, and this is not a proud moment, I've had people cry on meetings because they realized we can't afford it, we haven't budgeted for it, we're going to go out of business because it's a primary
Yep.
revenue stream for them.
Yep.
And I hate that, and it's very sad, but I know what's about to happen. I can see the writing on the wall. For the companies that are prepared, they're going to move from small business up the ladder to large primes in the matter of 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
For the people that don't do it, they're going to try and sell their business if they were primary defense, but without CMMC, they're going to get pennies for the dollar to private equity.
Yes.
So their
Yep.
valuation is dropping by the minute that they don't do this. If their primary source of income is direct or indirect, the DoD. And so I tell people now, you either have the chance to, if you don't do CMMC, you need to diversify immediately and rapidly, or you need to pivot yourself right now to sell before it is a contractual requirement. And then
Right.
someone's just buying your headcount and your machines, right? It's like that, because that's about all you're worth, because your book of business has just evaporated very quickly. So I kind of jumped in a little bit to the closing remarks. I just gave mine, Jeff. It's, you can be early to CMMC, you can be late, but you can't be on time. That's my classic saying. But the problem with being late is you might lose enough business to either require you to shut your doors or to sell off
Yep.
for way less than you're actually worth. And that's kind of problematic. But Jeff, over to you. Close us out. You have the whole internet here, the thousands of views that we get. What do you want to tell the people to round us out here?
Yeah, don't become a distressed property. And also to understand, if you are a subcontractor to a prime and you don't understand your criticality in their supply chain risk matrix,
Yep.
you need to increase that, because a lot of times if that is increased, and if your prime's subcontractor risk matrix puts you at a high criticality, then a lot of times they're going to help you.
Yep.
They're going to help you, and you're going to get resources that you didn't even realize that you had, and probably from people that have already done it, and within the big company, they'll put those resources on there just to protect their own supply chain. So that's one source. But also, Summit 7 was an amazing partner for us. And I, as a CIO, took, very distinct personal responsibility in this. The level 2 assessment guide put out by the DoD, I still have my copy of that. And let me tell you what, it has, highlighter marker, it has notes in the side, it's got tab stickers on top. It was everything, because the only way that you're going to get your team motivated is if you lead by example. And leading by example with your team, you have to dig in, you have to be the smartest person in the room. And when we went through DCMA, DIBCAC, and with the C3PAO for JSVA, it was my screen that was sharing the examples. It was, I was bringing up all the artifacts. I was doing that. So you got to live by that example, live by that leadership, and understand it. And I think that provides a lot of clarity to what may be, trying to rely on other people. You're able to understand, is there quality there? Is there not quality there? Is there movement, and not? And I know that You not just for if you are a prime, you also need to be exactly like the example of Lockheed. You need to be looking at your supply chain because that will flow down. I think right now
Yep.
it is still a little bit undefined, but Summit 7 also has a plan, to help people and companies, both sides of the supply chain, to understand what that risk is, to build out the risk matrix and to go forward. But yeah, that's it. I think we can go on for a couple of hours.
We could just keep rolling the tape, Jeff. You and I have war stories upon war stories to talk about, but we'll leave that for another time. Thank you, my friend, for joining. We look forward to having you on the show yet again, and be safe jumping out of airplanes here in the future, Jeff.
I appreciate you.
Awesome. Have a good one, sir. Thank you all for joining, and have a good rest of your day.